expects to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in Management from UW-Stout sometime in 2012. As the father of three, who is also working full-time as the Manager of Information Systems at MCD Inc. here in Madison, he obviously knows much more about multitasking, and that should serve him well on the board. He succeeds former Regent Jessica Schwallenberg. Troy?
I'd like to thank you all for the welcome. Everybody's been very gracious to me. As with Mark, I returned to school later in life, 18 years after my two-year degree. It's been quite a process. I chose UW-Stout because very adult-friendly as far as the program, the distance ed program, and catering to adults. In making my selection, I did evaluate a lot of the different campuses, and then inside and outside of the UW system, I've taken classes at other institutions outside of the system, and I've seen what works, what doesn't work, and I'm just really hoping that I can bring that perspective to this board to just improve the system. I'm just looking forward to working with all of you and learning from you as well.
Thank you very much. Troy, am I correct that you're doing all your work by distance learning?
Yes. Yes.
So that really does bring a different perspective than we've had before. Right. That's terrific. A third new regent, Katie Pointer, will be introduced in person at the September meeting. She regrets that an out-of-town commitment made prior to her appointment precludes her being here today with us. Now, Kevin, I think you have an introduction.
I do, and thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I wanted to take a moment to recognize a long-standing colleague who's stepping into a new role, UW-Stevens Point Provost Mark Nook, who's graciously agreed to serve as Interim Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at UW System. Mark is stepping in, as you all know, for Rebecca Martin, who has accepted a position with the U.S. Education Delivery Institute in Washington, D.C., and will be leaving the UW System later this month. And we'll have more to say about that and Rebecca tomorrow morning, but congratulations and best of luck in your new role. Mark, it's over to you. Back to you, Regent Spector.
Okay. This morning's agenda focuses on two related items about a vital topic, budgets. First, we will have an informational review of the 2011-13 biennial state budget and its major components affecting our system. Next, we will turn to a significant action item, consideration of the UW System 2011-12 annual operating budget, which includes setting tuition rates for the coming academic year. When we last met on June 9 and 10, the Legislature's Joint Finance Committee had just adopted new leadership flexibilities for all UW institutions, changes that President Riley characterized as the most significant we've seen since the UW system was created almost 40 years ago. As you'll hear, those flexibilities were preserved in the final budget bill approved by both legislative houses and signed by Governor Walker. Along with these new opportunities, the final legislation also contains a fair number of challenges for us. This all will affect how we look at the 2011-12 operating budget. After President Riley comments on the biennial budget, Senior Vice President Michael Morgan will provide a brief overview of the major changes that occurred since we last met. There will be time for questions and discussions about the biennial budget before we transition to the annual budget. So, Kevin.
Thank you, President Spector. And you're correct that this two-year budget bill does contain both challenges and opportunities for the UW. While it reduces taxpayer support for UW institutions' operating budget by $250 million, it also provides long-sought statutory changes in key areas like budgeting and financial management and personnel. The final budget bill preserved our unified statewide system while also providing all of our universities with a much-needed package of new flexibilities. Not all the cutting of red tape that we had asked for, but a good start. We've long advocated for the authority to manage our operations more efficiently, and we sincerely appreciate the legislature's and the governor's effort to offer reasonable changes that will enhance our ability to cope with near and long-term challenges. Our chancellors, joined by business and community leaders advocated very, very strongly for these flexibilities through the Wisconsin Idea Partnership. Governor Walker said from the start that he was open to the idea of providing more flexibility to all UW system institutions, and legislators gave us a budget that did just that. Large funding cuts will be felt by everyone in the form of larger class sizes, reduced services, smaller paychecks, and higher workloads. Right at the time when our citizens want more access to higher education and are voting to that effect with their feet, our enrollment, after all, is the highest it's ever been at 182,000. Right at that same time, our budgets are being cut. We are not alone in this dilemma. Other universities and colleges around the country, as I'm sure you've all seen, are grappling with similar issues. I've asked two of our chancellors, Mike Lovell and Dick Telfer, to talk to us a little bit today about the negative effects of these cuts to their universities in Wisconsin. So let's start with Chancellor Lovell, who I think I saw arrive. Yeah, Mike.
Sure.
You want to go over to the microphone, Mike?
Use the podium.
Or you can go here.
You want to use the podium, Mike?
No, it's okay. I'm moving quick. Since becoming chancellor, I've had the opportunity to have a lot of meetings with students from across our campus in different venues, and inevitably, at all these meetings, I hear the same story. Students meet with their academic advisors, they make a plan of study, and then in order to graduate, and then when they go to try to register for the classes, they get locked out. We just don't have enough sections. I provide enough seats for all of our students so that we can help them move along to graduate in a timely manner, which is really one of the goals of the UW system. And I want to read an email from a student I got on February 1st of this year, kind of explaining her experience last semester in this area. She said, Chancellor Lovell, I'm writing to you to express my frustration I had this semester with signing up and getting into my classes. I'm a senior this year, planning on graduating next December. With only 2 semesters left, it was very frustrating to not be able to take many of the classes I need in order to graduate on time. Most of the classes I needed for graduation were closed. During the first week of classes, I was incredibly stressed and nervous that I wouldn't have the classes I needed. I found myself running around campus asking professors to please let me into their classes. Not only was it a hassle to run around chasing my professors, but I was forced to take whatever classes I could get into instead of classes that sparked my interest or that worked into my schedule. I hope that next semester a resolution to this problem will be found so this doesn't happen again. Thank you for your time and interest in this matter. Suzanne Posh. Unfortunately, with the current budget reductions, I'm afraid this problem is only going to get worse. We are going to have to reduce staffing on our campus and ultimately reduce some of the courses and the sections that we are offering today. And I think we all have an obligation in order to have our students be able to graduate in a timely manner. And I think that we need to figure out a solution to this problem going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor Lovell. Chancellor Telfer.
I think the theme is pretty similar, but I want to talk about 3 things that impact our campus. The first one has to do with class size. Over the past, I would say roughly 8 years, the class sizes on our campus have just been skyrocketing. It's been going up regularly, and that's because we've faced these kinds of budget issues. We have about 1,000 more students on our campus than we had 10 years ago. And as part of that process, we haven't been able to keep up with having people there. We've been paying the bills, but we've been having to put more people in each of those classes. The second thing I want to mention has to do with what I'm going to term administrative leanness, and then I'm going to say that's not the correct word. It's not lean. It's just stripped so we're having trouble functioning with some of the things that we need to do. And I'm going to broaden that beyond, I'm not talking about leanness in terms of the number of chancellors and vice chancellors and stuff like that. I'm talking about getting people to clean the rooms, getting people to provide financial aid to students, getting people to work in admissions and so forth. And what happens, because we've had such a great turnover this year, we don't have someone there who knows how to do that because we don't have backups for those positions. The third thing I want to talk about has to do with something that this board is very familiar with and very supportive of, and that is the high-impact practices that we pride ourselves on providing for our students. Undergraduate research, study abroad kinds of opportunities, tutoring, and a variety of other things is really hard to find the money for if we're getting cut the kinds of cuts that we're having. So those are the three things that I wanted to mention that are really going to impact our campus.
Well, thanks, Dick and Mike. And I know that all the other chancellors could provide this board with similar stories about the problems that this large budget cut will cause on their campuses, at their institutions. The flexibilities which we received and which, as I said, we're very grateful for, will help, but they will not alleviate some very tough and unhappy and finally unwise for the larger society choices having to be made on our campuses about things we will not be able to do, and I think we should not lose sight of that. Some tough decisions ahead for our institutions. Many of these cuts in that sense are shaping up pretty much the way we thought they would, but one important provision in the budget bill will mean that take-home pay for our faculty and staff won't shrink quite as much as we expected. That's thanks to a statutory change that was added by the Assembly, in which UW employees will be able to make their mandated new retirement contributions on a pre-tax basis, resulting in some savings. For an employee, for instance, who makes $36,000 a year, the ability to make pre-tax contributions will save an estimated $475 a year. We need to find new ways to keep making the case for the value of our mission and the value of the faculty and staff who are the ones, after all, who deliver on the mission. We need to help lead Wisconsin and the nation out of this recession and thereby position ourselves for new investments in the UW by our fellow citizens. Investments we all need to ensure that our joint future is bright in Wisconsin. So to review in more depth the challenges and opportunities contained in this far-reaching budget bill, I want to turn the floor over to Senior Vice President Michael Morgan. Michael.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As President Riley indicated, I'm going to walk through Act 32, which is the 2011-13 biennial budget. Much of what I'll talk about today is something you've already heard, because largely the presentation that I made the last time we were together regarding the budget passed out of joint finance is in fact the budget that I'll talk about today. The legislature was very efficient in terms of its run of the budget through its process, and very few changes were made. But what changes were made, I'll try to point out as we go along. The first piece related to the budget are the numbers. Frankly, nothing changed as it relates to the reduction, as President Riley indicated. We saw a $250 million decrease in the university systems budget. What did change, however, is the cut in the share that Madison received in this budget. It went from about 50% to 38.5%, or a cut that went from $62.5 million to about $47 million. The UW system saw a 25% cut in its budget in the final act, and the 51 FTE that had been called for remained in the final act also. In addition to the cuts in UW system, what the legislature required and governor required is that UW system report back to joint finance and the DOA secretary with a plan on how we're going to take that cut. President Riley has convened an advisory committee to help make recommendations to UW system on how we will alter the way that we do business in our relationship both with the campuses and the board as we cycle through this budget. With regard to flexibilities, as was indicated, we did fairly well Help me. I thought when we had... Oh, well. Yeah. We did receive some flexibilities in the budget, flexibilities that the system had been advocates for a very long time. One of the flexibilities relates to the budgeting practices as it relates to the relationship between the state and UW system. In the past, the budgets that we received and the dollars that we received from the state of Wisconsin came with a lot of rules. They were called appropriations. In this budget, we did receive the flexibility that we had asked for, and that is a budget block grant. That is dollars that come to the university that give leaders in the university system on colleges and university campuses throughout our system an opportunity to make decisions to to make investments according to the priorities of the system and not based on appropriations of the state. We did get that. We did get that flexibility. There are only two appropriations in our budget. One is for operations, general program operations, and the other is for debt. That is a significant step forward. Although UW system administration still has an appropriation in the budget separate from the block grant, so we still have to live under those old appropriation rules. Another flexibility that was welcome is in the tuition area. Now, tuition is going to be the subject of a task force study, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But as it relates to tuition, the budget removes all the statutory limitations on use of tuition for UW system. However, a limitation in terms of how much tuition can be charged on an annual basis was put in place for this biennium. As I indicated, this issue of tuition use and how the legislature's relationship will evolve in the tuition area with the Board of Regents is something that will be the subject of the task force work. Human Resources saw some substantial moves forward. We received the ability, the Board of Regents received the ability to allow for supplemental pay plans for classified and unclassified staff within UW system. UW Madison received this flexibility also, but is separate from the boards. These supplemental pay plans would be in addition to the pay plan that would be approved by the Joint Finance Committee, the Joint Committee on Employee Relations. But any supplemental pay plan still would have to go back to JOCR, or the Joint Committee on Economic Relationship, before they could be put in place. And the pay plan would have to be funded from UW system resources. No separate resources will be forthcoming from the state. As it relates to personnel system, once again, the state is affording university system an opportunity to remake its personnel system in a way that works well for higher education. But once again, the approval of any new personnel system would have to first go back to the legislature, to the Joint Committee on Economic Relations, before it could be put in place. This, too, this whole issue of personnel system is also a subject of the work of the task force that I'll talk about a little bit later. Some other things, other flexibilities that were received, the UW system, because it will make its own personnel system, will have the ability to conduct collective bargaining with both classified and unclassified employees within our system. And UW employees will not be counted in the state count starting in 2013. And the last piece is the $12,000 dual employment cap was removed. That was the cap that had been in place for a very long time that made it unlawful for any UW employee who works at one institution to go to another institution and command a payment of more than $12,000 on an annualized basis. In the procurement area, the Department of Administration is required in this budget to delegate to the Board of Regents and to UW Madison the authority to enter into contracts for materials, supplies, equipment, and services related to higher education. We are already in discussions with the Department of Administration on getting that delegation to us as quickly as possible. While they're required, they haven't made that delegation yet. We're also in the process of trying to understand what is a service, what is equipment and supplies uniquely related to the higher education. Another great flexibility that initially came through joint finance as a flexibility just for the university system, but was expanded in the final budget, relates to the threshold for having to go through a formal bid process for goods and services. That threshold was lifted from $25,000 to $50,000. This budget also authorizes the board to accept gift of vehicles. So we have that ability to work with local car dealerships, I guess, to provide vehicles for probably our chancellors. Board of Regents is also authorized. I don't know how that would work, but it seems to me that would be a good relationship for a local car dealer. The Board of Regents are also authorized to establish travel policies, but as you can see, this flexibility is not until the beginning of the first year of the next biennium. So they certainly give us enough time to work through and try to understand what our new travel policies will be. So in the flexibility areas, I just hit on some of the high points. We talked about some of the other flexibilities the last time we were together. I want to talk just a little bit about something I've already mentioned, and that is the Special Task Force on Restructuring and Operational Flexibilities within UW system. This is going to be a fairly large task force, and as you can see, some of the flexibilities that we have already received are going to be revisited by this task force. The structure of the city, the structure of the system in terms of its governance. We went through, as you know, a very intense discussion about whether or not the Board of Regents would continue to make policy for all of the colleges and universities within the UW system. We're going to revisit that discussion with the task force. Personnel systems is something that's going to be reviewed by this task force. Tuition is something that this task force will be involved in, as well as all these other areas. The composition of the task force is interesting. 17 members. The Senate Majority Leader appoints 6 members, and the Assembly Speaker appoints 6 members. And they have to appoint members from these categories that I have on this slide here. 3 business or public leaders, 2 current or former UW chancellors, members of the Board of Regents, and 1 member from their respective houses. In addition to that, the Senate and Assembly minority leaders also will have an opportunity to appoint a member, and the governor appoints 2 members. The co-chairs of finance will decide who will serve as the chairperson for this task force and for the important work of this task force. As it relates to the task force, $50,000 were appropriated to pay for the expenses of the work of the task force, and the staff for the task force will be a partnership between the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, staff from the Department of Administration, and the staff from UW System Administration. Hard work ahead for us in the area, in all these areas as it relates to the work of the task force. There are a couple of other areas I just want to highlight here. One is in the WISNet broadband area. This budget requires that a financial audit a financial and a performance audit be done on telecommunication services in UW system in a relationship with WISNet by the Legislative Audit Bureau, and that audit has to be done and completed by January 1st, 2013. This audit is a result of some discussion, some intense discussion that has been going on in the legislature for a while now related to the relationship between WISNET, which is a internet service provider for UW system colleges and universities, and an important player in our research infrastructure here in Madison, as well as throughout the system, and the Board of Regents. The legislature put in place a ban for the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents to underwrite the services of WISNET. This audit, I think, is intended to ensure that we're complying with the law. The budget also has language in it that prohibits the university from being a member or a shareholder or a partner in any third-party entity providing telecommunication services to anyone other than higher education institutions. This would take effect on July 1st, 2013. Once again, this gets at the discussion that's going on in the legislature about the appropriateness of the relationship between the Board of Regents and colleges and universities in the UW system and WISNET, which once again is a provider. The last piece that I want to talk about relates to broadband. This is an area that Ray Cross has been doing a lot of work. The chancellor at UW Colleges and Extension has been doing some great work in this area, working with the legislature. The budget deleted the prohibition from receiving or expanding funds related to the BCCB grant awarded to UW Extension as part of the federal government's policy emphasis on expanding internet services, broadband services, to underserved regions throughout the United States, including Wisconsin. While the prohibition was deleted from the budget, it had originally been in the budget, but the governor vetoed it out. UW Extension is not allowed to commit any funds under this BCCB grant that had not been committed before June 15, 2011, unless approved by the Joint Committee on Finance. There's only one, I think, piece that remains to be resolved in terms of grant commitment as it relates to this grant, and that relates to a WASA. That issue or that challenge or that question in terms of whether or not WASA will be permitted to participate in this program and receive a grant from the BCCB program, I think is going to be taken up on next Tuesday. It's going to be before Joint Finance. The reason why I talked more extensively about WISNET and broadband, particularly as it relates to WISNET, we're very, very concerned that the language in the budget will harm the ability of the university colleges, University of Wisconsin system colleges and universities to continue this relationship with WISNET. As was pointed out by Paul DeLuca and Darrell Bozell at our June meeting, if that relationship is tampered with in any way, it may result in great harm done to the research infrastructure that's in place to benefit big research institutions like UW-Madison as well as UW-Milwaukee. We continue to reach out to the legislature and work with concerned parties in this area. Ray and I have had some good meetings with telecommunication companies who are the most concerned about our relationship with WISNET, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to resolve this issue prior to 2013, when we may have to change our relationship. So that concludes my hopefully brief and informative summary of the budget. I can answer any questions. I can try to answer any questions.
Michael, first, thank you for being brief and informative. You were both. Thank you very much. Let's see if the Regents have any questions. Danae.
I'm curious about the task force insofar as what are some possible scenarios of conclusion of their work. So, because that's a broad array of topics that they're supposed to study or whatever it is that they're doing. So the question is, can they undo what has already been approved? Is that a possibility? And then this sort of related to that, what's the time frame? Are they, by the time we do X, we're done, or is this a forever more task force that will exist?
No, I should have pointed that out, and I had it in my notes, but I ran right past it. The task force work is to be completed by January 1st, 2012.
Okay.
So they don't give themselves a whole lot of time to get the work done. My hope is that the Board of Regents and all the concerned parties will look at ways to improve the ability of the university system to provide that high-quality service to our students in the system. All of these, all of the topics that will be visited by the task force are things that we've already had discussions with the legislature about.
Right.
We appear to be moving in the right direction. As I just pointed out, there are many flexibilities that were afforded in this budget that have been the subject of discussion for a very long time between UW system and governors and legislatures. We made a big leap forward. My hope is that we will be able to engage this very important commission and continue moving forward with very positive outcomes in tuition, additional flexibilities in all the areas that we talked about.
That's your hope.
I think that's how we need to go into these discussions, and that is that we will come out on the other side with those changes, right, that strengthen our ability to provide, that high-quality educational experience that we strive for in UW system, right?
And Danae, we're going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, too.
Okay.
Jeff.
Michael, my question has to do with the budgeting flexibilities that we have been given in the budget bill, and specifically the block grant concept. As I understand the flexibility, it has to do with giving the system block grant without specific allocation, and directs the system or directs the Board of Regents to pass that block grants down to the campus level. Is that correct?
Well, the law actually is silent in terms of how it is that the Board of Regents, moves the flexibilities, all the flexibilities of the board afforded to system down to colleges, universities, and extension within the system. However, I think the legislature and the governor heard what this board said with regard to its policy under the Wisconsin Idea Partnership, and that it would delegate to the extent to the furthest extent possible. I forget the exact language. Delegate all these flexibilities to campus, to colleges, universities, and extension within the system. So I think the expectation on the part of the board, as expressed by its policy on the WIP, as well as the legislature, is that in fact, yes, we will move that budgeting flexibility to the campus. We are going to have I think, a discussion, and I know that President Riley has already reached out to chancellors and began the discussion with them about, how it is that we, to the future, work through block grant, this whole block grant delegation. Because it came so late, because the budget is passed so late, we weren't able to put in place any real policy as relates to the first year of this biennium and the block grant. The block grant will be passed on, but there are very, very low rules in terms of how the block grant can be used, and I suspect that will be our policy to the future. But a good discussion has to be had, I think, between chancellors and the president of the system and the board on going forward what that block grant process will look like.
Does the block grant or does that flexibility and pushing down the application of the funds apply also to tuition revenues?
Tuition revenues as I indicated, the uses of tuition revenue, the restriction on uses, I should say, for tuition revenue were taken off in this budget. So a separate item in the budget made for more flexibility in terms of the use of tuition dollars. So yes.
So the campuses
So
can use the
campuses
tuition.
can exercise, broad discretion in terms of how they use tuition dollars in their budget.
So a campus wouldn't have to come to the Board of Regents to say, can we apply a portion of our tuition, for example, to financial aid?
No.
So that's something the campus could do on its own. Doesn't need Regent approval. Is
There are
that right?
no statutory preclusions, nor is there a Board of Regents policy right now that would stand in the way of campus from doing what they deem appropriate with tuition dollars.
Without Regent approval.
Without Regent approval.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Loftus?
Well, I'm afraid when you look at the totality of this budget and you add it all together, it's really a planned retreat from higher education and students in this state. It reminds me of one of those historical times when the generals went home to plan the next war and left the soldiers out on the field and told them it still could be won. This is bad news, no matter how clinically we describe it or discuss it. My question, Mike, has to do with what seem to be some incentives here that are intended or unintended. As you know, the Regents, I think in the late 80s and twice in the 90s, did enrollment management plans. They were called EMSs. I forget what the S stood for. Both to reallocate students around the state and to save costs and preserve quality. When you have this, and I was talking to President Riley about this, when you have this flip where the students now pay such a great percentage, well, great percentage, not percentage, but real cost of the university system, there seems to be an incentive somewhere in here that even though we may not be able to do a quality job, there is an incentive to enroll even more students, and that you would get some financial latitude from that. That's one question, if you could discuss that, or President Riley. The other is, in the same vein, there's certainly an incentive to find out-of-state or foreign students who will pay full fare. If you look at the numbers, we have very few out-of-state students who actually pay the full fare. Who is the out-of-state tuition set in this budget?
Yes.
By the legislature?
No. By the Board of Regents.
And what is it? We will see coming up, okay.
Yeah.
All right, can you just talk about this idea that there's...
Will I take the first question?
Yeah.
Mike, the first question I think had to do with, are there incentives built in to take more students, even though we don't seem to have the resources necessarily to do what we want for the students?
Well,
I got that right.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. As I was listening, it seemed to me that your question was cleverly disguised as a statement. I'm not sure quite how to respond to that, except to say this. I think the policy of the Board of Regents has been for a long time now, to notwithstanding the fact that we've seen cuts in the university budget, to continue to do a couple of things to push forward with the growth agenda, which, as you are aware, is our approach, is our policy to try to encourage more baccalaureate degree holders in the state of Wisconsin. In trying to do that and trying to offset some of the cuts in the budget, we have seen tuition increases that offset a portion of that. We've seen increases in financial aid to help those students who may find it difficult with access and affordability and access for the system. I think we, though, find ourselves in a place now where it's going to be very, very difficult. We had two chancellors who just, pointed out some of the challenges that they're going to have in their campuses and, continuing to provide a high-quality educational environment for students and to allow for, us to continue to drive the growth agenda. I don't know how else to respond to your question except to say that we do have budgetary flexibility now. We can move dollars around from one line item to another to get at our priorities. In the past, we never had that flexibility. We had to take the budget in a very prescriptive kind of a way and use the dollars as they had been laid out in the budget. We have an opportunity now, if we so desire to do so, although fewer dollars, to drive some of your priorities. But it's going to be very, very difficult. I'm looking at Frida because I didn't bring this statistic on with me, but the percentage of our overall expenditures, GPR versus student, has flipped quite a bit. I don't know if you have that trend.
21%?
Yeah. Yeah, we have 18% GPR funded as a portion of our budget, plus as opposed to 21% now our budget is funded from student fees, which include tuition. And that trend has been in place, has been growing over the last several years. So your question regarding tuition and its relationship to GPR, yes, GPR began to rescind, tuition becomes a bigger and important component of resources for UW operation.
Mike, let's have Kevin comment on that as well, if it's all right.
Thanks. And yeah, just let me add to what Michael said, and then some of the chancellors may want to respond to regional offices issue too. What we've seen, and it's been true in public higher education across the country in recent years, is students and families picking up more of the tab for their education. In this system, we talk constantly about enrollment across the system at the individual universities. Some of our universities under the growth agenda umbrella have chosen to grow the number of students that they have coming to their institutions. Not all of them have, however. Some of them have chosen to focus much more on retention and graduation efforts to get more students at the same number through to a degree. So one of the virtues of a system is you have the push and the pull across the system where you can have some growing and some not. There is, I think, under the growth agenda and because of the way the finances are working out, an incentive for many of our institutions to grow. And I think especially now with the tuition flexibility that we got, that we talked about earlier, chancellors will have the ability to ensure that the additional tuition that comes in from any additional students they take does go under preserving and enhancing the quality of the education that those students get. We've also had a way for institutions to propose and have approved differential tuitions, which again, with the very often instigation of our students, have said we want to improve this particular feature of student life, this particular feature of our academic life, and we are willing to pay this much in order to do that. So within that larger context, I think we do need to recognize that students and families, again, are being asked to pick up a much larger percentage of the cost. I think in the long run, that's foolish, because if we start, and it's already started to some extent, to be forcing some families, at least in students, out from the ability to pay, we will be going in the wrong direction from where we need to go as a society. And I think I would argue that having more of our folks educated to a post-secondary level in the 21st century is so important that the wider society ought to be willing to invest more heavily in it, not just the individual students and families who find their children or their adult students at a campus paying tuition at any given time. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to address that in any way.
Are there any other questions up here? Rick?
There's clearly an incentive. Hopefully, the biggest incentive is to serve as many of the students from Wisconsin and beyond that need us. And there is, however, a financial incentive when more funds, like an E&G budget, education in general, about 55% of the funding of that now on our campus is coming from tuition and fees. Pretty typical the other campuses too. And so it's basically a flip at 40-45% from JPR. But the larger incentive for all of us, the keepers of the cost, for us to kind of keep those costs under control, and the price subsidizers, the private sector, the donors, the state, and the feds, is to figure out how we can give even higher quality education to more people at a lower per capita degree cost. So the incentive for all of us is to recognize that we're in this together and that we have to be entrepreneurial and innovative in how we do this. And so the flexibilities are important, greater freedoms to be able to mechanically do these things. But the real challenge is, are we smart enough, are we bright enough, are we entrepreneurial enough to figure out together, not just the institutions, but the price subsidizers, how to do this in a lot better way and engender greater confidence between the keepers of the cost and the price subsidizers. That's the way I try to explain that. So a lot of our campuses for years have been incentivized to be much more entrepreneurial, and we're doing a lot of different things on the campus to try to figure out how to have a more, let's say, sophisticated, diversified, strategic financial plan to support where we're trying to go to enhance a better quality education. That's even more important than for more students, is to make sure it's better quality. And that's what you heard is the big challenge that we're facing, is how to pull that kind of thing off. But no matter how much flexibilities we give, for example, the block grants are nice, but it's the size of the block that's important. So we also have to have a lot better openness to being much more innovative and entrepreneurial.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody else? All right. Thank you for that informational presentation, sir.
You're welcome.
Now we go on to the annual operating budget. So we're going from the informational to the action. Much of our attention today will focus on setting tuition for the coming academic year, but there are many other moving parts to this budget that we should understand and discuss. As the Regents review this proposed annual budget, we will again consider a balanced big picture, including not only the price students pay, but also the aid they receive to reduce that cost. We should consider the more subjective matter of lifelong benefits students derive from a first-class college education, as well as whether our institutions have the resources to deliver that first-class educational experience. We must also keep in mind the broader benefits that all of Wisconsin derives from having an educated workforce. We want to ensure that the UW system institutions retain a robust capacity to serve as economic engines for the state. In light of the flexibilities now granted the UW system, we must examine the annual budget to ensure that we are pursuing every opportunity to use this new authority to stretch dollars further and serve students better. Kevin.
Thank you, Mike. As you say, it's important to consider that big balanced picture when looking at this annual budget. A lot of what we try to do is balance off a variety of goods and try to move forward with the right balance. As we present this annual operating budget, we're keeping our eye on the long-term goal of preserving broad access to a high-quality educational experience. As I mentioned, Wisconsin is not clearly the only state where universities have to tighten their belts to deal with state budget cuts, but we have successfully avoided the kind of double-digit tuition increases that some other public universities have seen that would place a much heavier burden on our students and their families. To continue serving more than the 182,000 students we have now and continue serving them well, UW institutions need some additional revenues to preserve high-quality degree programs, to help more students graduate on time with the stresses on that indicator that Dick indicated, and also to support mission-critical functions at all of our universities. As we discussed, the biennial budget provides significant new operational flexibilities. We're grateful for those. However, these chancellors who sit before you and their provosts and other of our colleagues will still need to make very tough choices about the allocation of diminishing resources on their campuses, just as we heard from Mike and Dick Telfer. I know the members of this board share an abiding commitment to keeping public institutions excellent, accessible, and affordable. With that in mind, I am proud of our effort in recent years to keep tuition increases reasonable and predictable. For the last 4 years now, we've held the increases at our four-year campuses to 5.5%, which is less than students have experienced at our peer institutions generally. If you accept our recommended budget this year, the 5.5% increase would mean that UW-Madison tuition would rise by a total of $659 for the coming academic year. That total includes a 5.5% general tuition increase of $409, plus the $250 differential tuition increase for the Madison Initiative for undergraduates. Even with the total $659 annual tuition increase, UW-Madison's tuition is still projected to be the second or third lowest among the Big Ten universities. For the 5.5% increased tuition at UW-Milwaukee would increase by $400 annually. If you approve the 5.5% increase at the comprehensive institutions amounting to an average of $311 more per year, these 11 UW system campuses would continue to rank among the most affordable universities in their peer group. Tuition for non-resident undergraduate students, excluding differential tuitions, and resident graduate students would increase by the same dollar amount as resident undergraduate students, which is consistent with previous actions of this board. At a time of continued economic turbulence, we know that any tuition increase is tough to swallow. Again, this is a discussion about balancing the quality of education with the price students have to pay for that education. In the end, it's a question about the value proposition we offer to our students and their families. You may recall the very interesting presentation that Professor Sandy Baum made here back in February, where she talked about the net cost of college, the net cost, when you consider student aid in the form of grants, scholarships, and tax benefits that are available. According to the College Board's latest report on these trends, and she was with us representing the College Board, the work she's done for them, according to that board's latest report on these trends, the average net price for full-time students has actually declined over the past 5 years after adjusting for inflation. The net price for full-time students has declined after adjusting for inflation over the past 5 years. And that's true, by the way, for public universities, for private universities, and two-year colleges as well. About 2/3 of our UW system undergraduate students now receive some form of financial aid, and about half of those receive at least one outright grant or scholarship. Wisconsin Higher Ed Grant Awards, the WEG Awards, and federal Pell Grants comprise the largest sources of student aid at UW institutions. 1 out of every 5 resident undergraduate UW students now receives a WEG award. They did last year, with an average award of $2,161. State funding for WEG UW will remain flat next year, but UW leaders have worked with the Higher Education AIDS Board, HEAB, to approve a new formula that will spread these grants among a larger number of students. This fall, the first cohort of the Wisconsin Covenant Scholars will arrive at UW campuses, with participating students receiving between $250 and $2,500 in aid each year. Continuing students who first enrolled before 2011-12 will still also be eligible for tuition increase grants, which help to offset some tuition increases for qualified students. And because of the new flexibilities, again, provided by the state, the UW system can reallocate unused funds from that tuition increase grant, the TIG program, to assist other financially needy students. Together with more need-based aid from private sources, most notably in Wisconsin, the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, the mortgage gift, these are important steps to ensure that we back up our commitments to provide a high-quality education that remains accessible and affordable. So I'll turn the floor over now to Senior Vice President Morgan and Associate Vice President Harris for more detail on the proposed annual budget, which we are asking you to vote on today. So Michael and Frida.
Before you start, Michael, I just want to make sure Tom's question was answered on the non-resident and graduate tuition goes up, if I understood what you said, Kevin, by the same amount that the resident increases. So until we know the base that it is now, we don't know the exact number, but it's up by that amount. I think that was a question you asked.
Yeah, I'll have a variation, but it'll wait till the end.
I'm going to ask Vice President Frida Harris to make the presentation, and then it will be available for any questions that you might have.
Good morning. Today we're asking the board to approve the 2011-12 annual budget and establish tuition and fee rates. The budget for 2011 as proposed includes $5.6 billion of resources, consisting of $1 billion of state funding, which is approximately 18% of the total funding for the system. Can you actually hear me? Sure. The budget also includes $1.2 billion of academic tuition revenue and $3.4 billion of other funds. And other funds includes federal funds, gift and grant funds, hospital revenues, operating revenues, so on and so forth. This budget also includes a $125 million general base reduction in GPR, the removal of $47 million of general purpose revenues that previously supported health insurance and retirement costs that employees are now required to pay, and it has significant reductions in funding for debt service and utilities. With debt service, there's a decrease of $41.7 million, and utilities, there's a decrease of $10.5 million. The budget does not provide new resources for new initiatives that were requested by the board, but it does provide, as President Riley has discussed previously, greater flexibilities for the UW system to manage its operations. As we've mentioned previously, but I don't think we've talked about it today, it also removes the requirement that employees take furlough days. So that is another piece of good news. As President Riley mentioned, under this proposed budget, resident undergraduate tuition would increase $409 at UW-Madison, and that excludes a $250 increase in the Madison Initiative for undergraduates, $400 at UW-Milwaukee, and $311 for students enrolled in our four-year comprehensive institutions excluding differentials. Tuition at the UW colleges will increase for the first time in 5 years by $235. This is a modest increase that would maintain a lower cost entry point for thousands of Wisconsin citizens and will keep the tuition that is paid comparable to students who are in liberal arts programming at the Wisconsin Technical College systems. Consistent with board practice in recent years, again, tuition for most other students would increase by the same dollar amount, and we're asking that tuition for non-resident graduate students remain frozen. If you're looking for the dollar amounts related to each of the students, you can find that by looking in Section B. There is a table B1, which will have all of the rates, including the ones for non-res and others. Tuition increases will be used to help offset the $125 million general budget reduction. The $37.5 million associated with a 5.5% tuition increase would cover about 30% of the reduction that is required. This funding is needed to allow our institutions to continue to provide quality education for system students. And it's especially important since our enrollments are at the highest levels ever, and student-related expenditures are primarily funded through the use of tuition dollars and state resources. So when we're talking about the other category, which is about 60% of the funding, that's really not used to educate our students. In the area of affordability, you should be aware that tuition at UW institutions will still be among the lowest in their peer groups after the increases that we've recommended. The materials that you have in your document have a table A2, which shows that when you look at combined increases for tuition, segregated fees, room, and board, the average increase is about 5% for a resident undergraduate student. Keeping in mind that most of our students are not residing on campus and participating in the meal plan. It's generally about somewhere between a quarter and a third of the students on our institutions who would have that full cost. We are seeing some additional resources in the area of need-based aid. Those are the Wisconsin Covenant Program, which has its first cohort enrolling this year. We have increases in funding related to the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, and there are also plans that have been put in place related to increases in institutional financial aid, especially through some of the differentials that we're seeing that would happen with the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates and the Eau Claire Blue Gold Initiative. In addition to that, the formula for the Wisconsin Higher Educational Grant, the WEG grant, has been changed so that we can provide funding for more students. As you probably remember, we had run out of WEG resources last year by July, and so we are much further ahead than we were at that point. Segregated fee rates, as proposed by campuses for your consideration, are proposed to increase $33 on average at our four-year institutions. A large portion of those increases are due to student-initiated programming changes and major projects at the institutions. Without the major projects that are being proposed, the seg fee rates would increase $25 on average. At the UW colleges, segregated fees are recommended or proposed to increase $20 on average, and that's primarily due to the addition of mental health services staff and student organization funding increases. Room and board rates are proposed to increase $248 or 4.2% on average, due primarily to new and remodeled residence halls at 6 campuses, facilities maintenance projects at 5 others, and increasing cost of food supplies. The budget materials that you have also include information about recommendations for allocating resources. Typically, there would be included in there your approval for the distribution of the large budget reduction, and it actually is in there, but that is not an optional allocation. The legislature actually dictated how that reduction would be taken. So at this point, I'd be happy to address any questions that you have regarding the annual budget.
And could I just emphasize one point that Frida made, and Frida, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think people should realize that the 5.5% base undergraduate tuition hike proposed covers only 30% of the $250 million cut. So I think it's very important for students and families and all of us to realize we're not putting the burden, so to speak, of that full $250 million cut on the backs of our students and families. Jeff.
Rita, one of the points that we constantly make in marketing education in the UW system is it's the net price, not the tuition that potential consumers should take into consideration. And that, by that I mean that financial aid is a large factor in determining what students pay. One of the things that you said is that the UW system has developed a formula this last year, designed to spread the WEG grants among a larger group of students. And I can see the advantage in doing that. We also recently learned of a study here at UW Madison called the Wisconsin Scholars Longitudinal Study, which is, as I understand, is a 3-year study that concludes that at-risk students and those who are most disadvantaged for those students, financial aid has a more positive effect on getting them through to graduation than it does for students who are less needy. And I wonder whether, if our objective is getting students through to graduation, rather than using financial aid for a year or two and then dropping out or postponing their education, whether we should be developing formulae that focus on the most needy students who apparently are more reliant on the financial aid and use that more effectively to get to the finish line.
The formulas that we have actually do focus on the most needy students. The grants that are received are based upon the expected family contribution, so you will get larger grants going to students who are the most needy students. So with the WEG, if you have zero expected family contribution, you will get a larger WEG grant than students who have higher family expected contributions. You'll also get larger Pell Grants and those types of things. What we hear is that it's important for us to make sure that we get aid to as many students as we can, because there are some students who are in the middle income group who, without that grant aid, might not be able to attend at all, and they won't get as much from other grants such as Pell and so on and so forth. So again, can we try to stretch those resources? And I think that was the goal. All of the students who are receiving a WEG grant are needy students.
No, I understand that, and that the study acknowledged that, but the study concluded, and I don't know whether the study is finished now or whether there's more data that's needed, but the study concluded that extra financial aid, even to needy students, had little statistical significance in terms of impact as to whether the students stayed in college and persisted toward graduation unless they were, these are the most needy of the students. I understand that the WEG grant is graduated so that the most needy get more than the less needy, but apparently, according to this study, it really is the most impact, way at the bottom of the socioeconomic graph.
I could add a comment in here, Frida and Jeff. This study, as you said, Jeff, is brand new, just released, I think, within the week, and the principal investigators and others who worked with them will be holding a conference on this campus shortly to get into the details of this and to talk about next steps and to analyze it further. So I think this is something we need to pay a lot of attention to, as you're suggesting, as we talk each year about how these formulas work. It's, as you know from your involvement with the Higher Education AIDS Board, these are wrenching decisions when you try to come up with these formulas, because it always is at some level robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then the question becomes, on what basis do you do the robbery? And that's sort of what you're talking about. Do we have new data that would suggest we could do it more wisely than other ways? And I think in the future we're going to pay a lot of attention. This is the first, from what I understand, the first study of its kind nationally to look at this question. So we're very interested to learn more about the outcomes, and we'll be coming back to the Higher Education AIDS Board and starting a conversation about the question you're raising based on what we learn as we go forward from that study.
Anybody else?
Drew. My question is about the non-resident tuition. If I understand it correctly, you said it goes up by the same dollar amount as the resident tuition. And looking at the table on B2, that looks like that is there for UW-Milwaukee. UW-Madison, it goes up by a higher amount than it does for the residents. And I guess the other part of it is the peer midpoint for non-resident. We are further than we are for the resident tuition. So I guess my question is, what's the rationale behind not applying a percentage increase the same for non-resident as resident? And really, that gets to where is the fairness for Wisconsin residents in that? And also the second part is, why are we farther from the peer midpoint for non-resident than we are for resident?
Okay. To answer those questions, let's just first go to the Madison one, where you mentioned that the non-res undergrads for Madison are increasing by a larger amount than the resident. Part of the Madison initiative for undergraduates is that there is a $250 annual increase related to resident undergraduates, but the increase for non-resident students is significantly higher. It's $750, I believe, for the non-resident undergraduate students. So that's part of their differential, which is why you're seeing that change there. With the other students, there's a little history here that several years ago, our standard practice was to increase tuition for non-res students by the same percent as we did for resident students. That led to us getting close to, and in some cases above, the peer median for other states. In addition to that, there was a change that was made that required us to increase even further the tuition that we had for non-resident students, and we ended up getting out of the market. We were so far above what others were being charged and paying that we started to lose students. We have turned that around. We, about 4 or 5 years ago, introduced competitive pricing for non-resident students. With the pricing that we have, we can have the pricing for non-res students, and what they pay will be enough to provide the state subsidy for a resident student. So this allows us to not only be able to attract non-resident students, but the tuition is significantly high enough for us to be able to support resident students as well. So that's part of the reason we're very conscious of the market. We want to make sure that we don't get beyond the market. Some other institutions may have more ability to do remissions and other things. We are also limited in the remissions that we can provide to non-resident students. It goes up by the same percentage that tuition goes up. So those are several other factors. But Lynn, did you? Okay. Sorry. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Tom?
Frida, just a point of clarification is, and then a question, but is our power to enact differential tuitions taken away from us in this budget?
No.
What is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Your power to enact for this 2-year period of time, I should clarify. It doesn't remove your power to do differentials. It just says that you can't enact any new differentials beyond those that were approved in June.
For this biennial?
For this biennial.
Right. So I guess that tool, which we have used extensively, is pretty much taken away from us.
Well, Tom, for this biennium, but just again to clarify, differential tuitions that were put in place earlier that had escalator clauses, if you will, those escalations can happen in this.
Can't have any new ones.
Have new ones in this.
The question is, well, the basic question is, we have 180,000 students and we're getting a tremendous budget cut, and we're sitting here talking like the growth agenda is still a live option. I mean, what are we going to do, 185,000, 190,000? Under the block grant, is the chancellor empowered to reduce or grow enrollment, or does that reside with us?
under the block grant, the chancellor, it doesn't talk about enrollments. I mean, there isn't any type of limitations and other things related to our ability to enroll students. What we've been operating under as a system is enrollment planning, and where campuses will plan what they do with their enrollments, and they have the ability currently, under your current board policies and practices, to increase or decrease enrollments based upon the resources that they have. However, with the growth agenda, which is what you've been working on, the goal has been to increase enrollments.
Or to increase graduates, some of which come from retention, some of which come from new enrollments.
Judy.
I don't have a question for Frida, but I would like to hear from some chancellors about the tuition increase proposal. I also, since I've got the floor, want to make a comment about the disappearance of the Wisconsin Covenant in the future, and the concern that raises for me, and an ongoing issue for the Board of Regents to figure out ways of approaching the intention of that. But I don't know if this is the right moment, but I would like to hear some.
We'll take your second comment as a comment.
It was just a comment.
And then your request that any of the chancellors want to comment on the tuition increase. Joe.
With a three-letter last name, you see those headlines a lot. Gal, budget devastating, or whatever, and that one was in the clip sheet not long ago. And that was said in the context of a longer conversation, but the reporter said, what do you think of this, losing $250 million and maybe you get 5.5% tuition? I said, well, it's pretty devastating, and there's no way around that. I mean, it truly is. This question on enrollment, if you have fewer resources per student, then increasing enrollment economically is a losing proposition, because the more students you have, the worse off you are in terms of resources. So we need to be very careful about that. This is always so difficult. How do you balance the needs of the institution and the people there with what the students pay, and their students over there? And my favorite thing as chancellor, I always say, is commencement and shaking all the hands. And it's 1,500 hands in May, and maybe a few of those people are sort of whatever, but most people, when they're getting their degree, they are excited. And I go home to my wife, and I'm just, wow, energy, and I'm a part of that and having an impact, and it's a great feeling. So I'm very sensitive to students. On the other hand, I also like to talk to our staff and faculty and let them know how grateful we are for the work that they do. And we have opportunities to do that, and with awards and day-to-day and so on. But one of the main ones is, as Chuck and now Michael and Kevin know very well, when we sign the certificates acknowledging all the years of service when somebody retires. And I try to go to all the receptions. And boy, this year, I think you probably said my arm's a little more tired than it normally is. And I asked our people, how many retirements do we have? It seemed like an extraordinary number. I said, we had 100. Now, the whole workforce, there's 1,000 people, so that's pretty significant. I said, what was it last year? It was 33. Now, some of that's demographics and things, but I don't think that's an accident in terms of the changing nature of compensation for our faculty and staff. And as you know from the Competitive Workforce Committee report, already we're behind the competition. And then when you throw in the increased health care payment and the pension payment, I think this is a pretty serious situation as far as how do we not really so much reward, but just keep our people in the game, so to speak, in terms of compensation. So when all these resources are taken out, we do need to try to put some back in, and that comes from tuition. And I'm glad Kevin pointed it out. I mean, it's at 5.5%, that's not even a third of what's being removed in terms of resources. So while we wish we didn't have to raise tuition, I mean, I always remind students and their families,
we would love tuition to never go up, right? I mean, there's no joy we take in that, but we do need to keep an eye on keeping the best faculty and staff so that that experience that we offer continues to be outstanding, and that when we get to commencement, people feel like I got a great value for what I paid. And I think even with the 5.5% increase, it still remains an incredible value what we offer here in the Wisconsin system. And one other thing I will say...
This is the last thing, Joe.
Okay. The conversation begins to get into financial aid, and I think that's really important, but you have to be careful. I found the latest proposal out of Madison well-intentioned but quite surprising. We would not be able to do something like that because our budget is premised on other assumptions. So if you wanted to go in that direction in the future, I think that's something that ought to be talked about in detail and not just done at the last minute as far as using tuition for need-based aid. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. Any other brief comments? Anybody else up here? Danae.
Sort of combining Tom's excellent question as in Regent Loftus and what Chancellor Lovell said, I wonder, and I think this is a question for you, Kevin, what is the process that you're enlisting or planning to enlist to really dive deep with the chancellors, provosts, whatever, in terms of the impact on the growth agenda based on today's realities, if at all? Because it seems that, I don't mean the if at all is if we're going to have to change our goals. Because it just seems to me that when you think of the young ladies, the students, I say young, she could have been 90, the student who wrote to Chancellor Lovell, and Tom's question about incentive to enroll, some of our campuses decided to achieve the growth agenda through enrollment, and others, as you said, seek to achieve the goals via retention and in terms of ultimate graduation rate increases. And for those who may have been thinking enrollment, maybe that's not such the wisest idea right now. And it just seems like I'm curious as to what the process is going to be to revisit the goals of the growth agenda.
It's a very good question. And we're in the process now of setting up meetings with each of the chancellors and their senior teams in the early fall to have that discussion after settles in what the cuts are, how they're going to distribute them, after they think a little bit about the flexibilities that they have and how they might use those, what they think of the goals they've set for both enrollment and retention and graduation. So once we do that, we'll have a better sense of what it feels like, and we can put it all together and see where we are. So we don't know now, but we're certainly aware, as a lot of the conversation this morning has implied, that we need to take a tough look at those goals. Now, having said that, I would also say, back again to Regent Loftus's question and partly to Chancellor Wells' response, I know a lot of the chancellors feel an incentive financially to keep on enrolling students, and also an incentive for access purposes, to not say we won't take any more students, even if there's a good supply of qualified students who we think could do well here. Can we, again, as I think Chancellor Wells said, approach what we do more entrepreneurially in new ways to involve new students and get them there? Our new student regent is a new model, taking all of his courses off campus. If you have more and more students doing that, you have a very different model as to how you deliver instruction and where your resources go to do that. You have a different student life model. I think all of those things we're going to have to look at very carefully in the coming months, but I think your question's a good one. We do have to look at it and see whether we can keep on with the goals we originally set up or not. It, again, would be, I think, disastrous for the state of Wisconsin if we can't keep up with the goals that we've set. On the other hand, it would be totally wrong for us to say, well, we're going to keep to the goals and water down in a severe way the quality of what we offer. We will not do that.
I just as a follow-up, I saw a hand over there, but as a follow-up, I would hope, because I likely won't be here to hear it, that as soon as you kind of synthesized all of that, that would be a really good presentation, discussion, what have you, with the Board of Regents.
We'll go to Regent Falbo and then Paul just a second. Regent Falbo was first.
I'm going to defer. Since Chancellor Telfer, do promise to come back to me?
I promised to come back to you, but I'm not going to go to Chancellor Telfer because Paul DeLuca had his hand up first.
I'm actually place-bound over here.
Technology.
But coming back to your insightful comment, the problem we're having, take for example the Madison initiative, which was entirely driven by the students to address some of their needs. We're not able to keep up with that because as fast as we collect tuition revenue from that source to meet those needs, we're losing on the budget ground. So we're actually going backwards on that despite increased competition and an agreement with the students to deliver those services. So we're going in precisely the wrong direction. Tuition increases are inevitable. I mean, I just don't see any way around those. We're desperately trying to mitigate those. Obviously, being able to use some tiny fraction of tuition to provide some offset to that would help a lot. But in this particular market, it's inevitable. We're already working very hard to reach the bottom of our competitive peers, and we're rapidly approaching there. And it's just getting to the point we may not be able to survive some of these activities and meet a growth agenda. So I think the growth agenda is seriously jeopardized by this budget decrease.
Dick.
And I was just going to react to a comment where you were posing it that we're going to enroll more or we're going to keep more that we have. The enrollment comes from bringing in more new people as well as keeping more people. And so part of the growth agenda is if we're doing a better job of keeping people on our campuses and so on, we're going to have more naturally without increasing, and we might even have to decrease the size of the incoming classes to stay stable. And that, frankly, is the point we're at. Our freshman class hasn't changed, but our enrollment has grown. So what I want to make sure we all understand is that it is not a matter of changing the growth agenda or any of us deciding we're going to take a bunch more people. We get a bunch more people if we do a better job. And so I think part of the growth agenda, if we're going to stay the same size or get smaller, we're going to take fewer freshmen. And we're going to take fewer non-traditional students who come in, and we're going to take fewer transfers. And that's the difficulty. Now, since I've got it, I'll be real quick. I did want to comment on the out-of-state piece, because as you know, we're fairly close to another state. The real problem we had 6 or 8 or so years ago on our campus is the out-of-state students fell off precipitously because we got the tuition wrong. So what I urge people to be very careful that we don't decide that's a mine where we're going to get a lot of money. The resources that we get because we're able to enroll out-of-state students doesn't take away, it adds to what we have for our Wisconsin students. And I don't want to discourage those students from coming to our campus in particular.
Thank you, Dick. Mike.
I have a couple of comments, probably getting a little more specific, but one of the things I saw in there is a $41.7 million increase in debt service. So do we make every other payment now?
A couple of the things that were included in the budget were things that were reductions in cost. And so it really doesn't impact our ability to do anything. So with the debt, what it is they did a debt restructuring. So for this year, we're paying less. Next year, we will see an increase in the amount of money that we have related to debt service because the costs will go back up again.
But we'll have more projects on board.
Right. And so and we'll have more projects too, yes. The other piece that you see as a decrease there is the decreases in state funding for health insurance and retirement. The funds are still going to be paid. It's just where it's coming from. So the state money went down, but the employees will be paying it.
I had a comment about that too. You said that there was a little savings in that the pension contribution was a pre-tax contribution. Cannot health insurance be the same way?
It already is.
It already is. And then You have one other. Oh, the page B2 I find to be very good, but I'm wondering, and not this year, of course, but for next year, if we could have the upper chart, if we could do that for non-resident also. So, I mean, we see a little bit of the non-resident in there, but we don't know how we compare to what other institutions are charging for non-residents. And also, if you consider expanding these charts to the comprehensive, I guess we have some ability now to set our own peer groups. If we could do that same kind of chart for a peer group for the comprehensives and the colleges and extensions, that would be a lot of good information for me. I don't know if anybody else feels the same. I don't, in some case, I know what we're comparing here. When it gets down to that lower chart, it doesn't mean a lot to me, and I don't know at all how it compares with the comprehensives and the colleges.
Okay. With the comprehensives, we have about 40 peers. So it becomes an issue of trying to gather that material in time for the board meeting.
Well, I think you can scale it down. I don't think it is 40 for our.
Okay, but I don't know which ones to choose. We've tried in previous years to have that information available, and we have asked our staff to go and look. Some of the information is not available at this point, so generally we don't know until the end of July, and then we'll have the complete comparison, and we do a peer table. We can add the non-res piece because when we go and look at the resident tuition at the institutions where we have the data, we can add that in there. If you want on the comprehensive, while we won't do the peers, all the peers, we will do whichever ones are available.
Frida, why don't we have you and Mike work, he wearing his chair of the budget and finance hat. Why don't you work that out for next time, and you'll come up with something. Okay, if anybody else doesn't have a burning question, I
have a burning question.
Okay, Tom.
Under the personnel system language, the Chancellor of UW-Madison is authorized to develop a new personnel system. And the Board of Regents authorized to establish a new separate personnel system for employees of all other UW institutions. With only Joker approval, if I'm reading this correctly.
That's correct.
And this seems to imply that these new personnel systems can, for example, forego the peer group test. These are new pay ranges, pay systems.
Is that a question?
Well, it says personnel, but I assume that means that there would be a new system of pay scales.
Well, I'm not sure there would be a new system of pay scale, but there would be a revamping of the way that we reach decisions in terms of how groups of employees, and presumably in this new system, how groups of employees are paid within this new personnel system. I don't know if it'll, get to, compensation packages for those groups, but it would certainly spell out an outline on how those decisions would be made.
So when does the Board of Regents and the Chancellor at Madison?
We have until the end of this biennium to get the work done.
So these new systems would not go into effect until the next biennium?
Until the next biennium. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, I would try to keep this on schedule generally. Welcome a motion to adopt the resolution which you all have received. I'm going to call it Resolution 2 because that's what it's called. Would anybody so move? Anybody second that?
Second.
Any seconds? Any other discussion on Resolution 2 as it appears in Mr. Drew?
Yeah, a few days ago I I received a letter from Chancellor Sorensen at UW-Stout, and I'm sure the other members of the Board of Regents did. It contained a brochure that showed the results of a study on the economic impact on Stout, that Stout has on the state of Wisconsin. And according to that study, for every $1 of state tax investment in Stout, it generates $9.59 of economic activity in the state of Wisconsin. A similar study for UW-Madison showed even more dramatic results, that for every state dollar spent there, that generated $21 in economic activity for the state. State dollars invested in the University of Wisconsin system create jobs in the public and the private sector, which generate tax revenue, and most importantly, educate our students to lead enriched and productive lives. Notwithstanding the good that the UW system does, the governor and the majority party in the legislature have presented us with a budget that provides massive cuts to the UW system, which have been outlined here this morning. The budget that we have been presented with is the product of choices that were made. This is not an austerity budget. In fact, this budget adds $1 billion in new spending while cutting K-12 and UW education by almost $1 billion. Now we are being asked to raise tuition by 5.5% on our resident students, which will generate a $37 million to partially offset what's been cut. For the first time in my knowledge, tuition at 21.6% of the budget will be greater than state GPR, which is 17.9%. We are moving away from the shared responsibility of the people of Wisconsin through their government to provide high quality and affordable higher public education to our citizens regardless of means, and we are moving towards a system that will be public in name only and will restrict access to more and more people of low and moderate income. I have supported similar tuition increases in the past when they were part of a responsible budgeting process that recognized the importance of the UW system and public higher education. But this tuition increase is nothing more than an attack on middle-class Wisconsin citizens and a giant step away from high-quality, affordable public education. Working people are not getting 5.5% pay increases. It is not fair to ask them to shoulder the burden of more cost for education. So what we are asking for, in addition to our faculty and staff doing more with less because of the cuts that they're going to be taking, we are now asking our students and their parents to pay more for less, although I am sure every effort is going to be made to maintain quality by our great faculty and staff. But it's not fair to ask people to pay more for less. It's going in the wrong direction. It sends the wrong signal, and for that reason, I'm opposed to the tuition increase.
Okay. Thank you, John. Anybody else want to comment about anything? Or about the, I'm sorry, about the resolution?
Limited to that.
Troy.
Yeah, I have a comment from a student perspective in, just talking to other students over the past week just about the resolution. I think it's important that this is communicated to the students in that the increase is just a third of the issue. I think they really have a feeling that this whole financial situation is strictly on their backs and that it's just not a piece of the puzzle. So I would just encourage some really good communication with the students and the public.
Good idea. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Ed.
Yes, thank you. I have the same feelings that Regent Drew has. People of the area that I live in the state feel, as our new Regent student has indicated, that they're going to be shouldering the burden of these cuts. So I think he's right. It should be explained and made clear. However, people are hurting, and I understand that we have to do something about it, but just on the basis of how this happened, I can't support this either. And that's all I have to say about that. I don't think it's fair for the citizens of the state of Wisconsin to be paying more for their children to be going to school. I understand it has to be done. I don't know what the solution to all of that is, but I'm just want to go on record as not supporting it.
Okay. Anybody else? These are difficult choices and difficult balancing decisions to make. All right, we'll ask for a vote then. All those in favor of the resolution denominated as Resolution 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? No.
No. Can we have a roll?
Sure. Jane, let's take the roll on this. It's an important matter, and we have enough people who are concerned that let's record that.
Regent Bartel?
Aye.
Regent Bradley?
Aye.
Regent Crane?
Aye.
Regent Danae Davis?
Aye.
Regent Stan Davis?
Aye.
Regent Drew?
No.
Regent Evers?
Yes.
Regent Falvo?
Yes.
Regent Loftus?
No.
Regent Manydeeds?
No.
Regent Pointer? Regent Pruitt?
Yes.
Regent Shervin?
Yes.
Regent Smith?
Yes.
Regent Spector?
Yes.
Regent Vasquez? Regent Walsh? Regent Womack?
No.
11 ayes, 4 noes.
Thank you. I do question why Regent Davis was surrounded by these no votes, but he voted yes, so his comment is...
I'm not easily intimidated.
All right. Thank you very much. I know that is a very difficult topic. It's been from the time Judy and I came on the board 6 years ago when we voted on the
First meeting.
First meeting that we had to face that, and it's not a pleasant task at all. Let me just tell you quickly, we're a little bit behind here. The schedule for the remainder of the day is we get a box lunch now. We were supposed to have a joint meeting of the Education and Business and Finance and Audit Committees at noon. Why don't we push that up to 12:20? That be okay?
Yep.
And that's
25 minutes?
Right here,
in
right
this
here.
room.
That's in this room. That's in this room. The capital planning and budget, Jeff, is in report team 18. The big news is we should reassemble here around 2:15, Regents, 2:15, for a closed session on evaluation. Thank you.